Bun venit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Ziua se apropie. Vom urmări astăzi un material realizat de colegii noștri de la Christians for Israel, în cadrul căruia invitatul emisiunii, Raouf Leerar, ne va ajuta să înțelegem situația din Orientul Mijlociu, unde oamenii din Israel sunt din nou în adăposturi antiaeriene, sirenele se aud pe străzile din Ierusalim, Tel Aviv și Haifa și unde în prezent are loc un alt război cu Iranul. Să-i ascultăm!
The people of Israel are again in bomb shelters. Sirens are being heard in the streets of Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa. Again, a war is going on, a war with Iran. To understand and have an insight of the context of this conflict, I will have an interview with Raouf Leerar. Raouf, welcome here at the table and help us please to understand what is going on. And my first question is, a war with Iran, why did the US and Israel seems to have started a war with Iran almost a week ago now, last Saturday?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I think it's very important to clarify and to give some clear and good information about what is going on. So indeed, like you said, the war started on Saturday, Shabbat morning, when Israel started to attack the Iranian regime. The question about why is it could be a really big question. I'll give the short reasons first, and then we can maybe dive a bit deeper into the history and to why there is so much hate and what is happening. But the Iranian regime has been in the process of making a nuclear weapon and has been declaring for decades that it wants to destroy Israel and the United States. They have always called Israel the small Satan and the United States the big Satan. And they were in the process of moving the enriched uranium, which is the core substance of a nuclear bomb, to a underground facility so far under the ground that even sophisticated US and Israeli bombers could never reach it. And that was the direct cause for Israel and the United States to start a combined attack. And also the ballistic missile production. Ballistic missiles are missiles that can fly through the atmosphere. Depends on the type of missile. You have ballistic missiles that can travel 600 kilometers, but also ballistic missiles that can travel 2,500 kilometers. And the distance between Iran and Israel is approximately 2,000 kilometers. So they have so many ballistic missiles that can really do horrible damage, and combined with the uranium that they were transporting to an underground facility out of reach, made the Americans and the Israelis decide to open the attack on the Iranian regime.
My question is, and I think you partly answered it, but let's look at it a little bit deeper. I understand that the US said we do not want you to have nuclear weapons, so we negotiate and negotiation went nowhere, so now we attack. But why Israel? Why not Britain, France? Here we have a small country, Israel, again in the picture. Why is Israel helping the US?
Well, you know, since this radical Islamic regime came into power in 1979, one of the first things that former Ayatollah Khomeini declared was that they would create a ring of fire around Israel to destroy the Jewish state and to kill as many Jews as possible. And with that ring of fire, he meant to install what you call in military terms proxies, so organizations that basically carry out your mission with your ideology, to train them, to finance them. So Hezbollah, which is a terror organization in Lebanon, which also joined the war now, but we can discuss it later, but also Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another terror organization, were funded and trained for years by the Iranian regime. And one of the main goals of the Iranian regime has always been to destroy Israel, first Israel, and then the United States of America. And because Israel has such high-level intelligence about the Iranian regime. Israel knows the Iranian regime and has the ability to fly with F-35 fighter jets, which are very sophisticated fighter jets, towards Iran and to attack the Iranian regime. The Israelis were the first to strike. And I think, when you look at the situation from a geopolitical perspective, the U.S. and Israel have a common enemy, an enemy that has pledged to destroy them for many decades, like I said before. And I think it's only reasonable and pretty logic that the U.S. and Israel combine forces now to attack the Iranian regime and to hopefully topple it in the end.
And sometimes when you read articles about Iran, Israel, you get a picture, but sometimes it's hard to understand. We are talking about a country which are divided by 2,000 kilometers. So can you short explain where are they? They are not neighbors, Iran and Israel.
No.
So what is between?
So you have Israel, of course, the Holy Land is located on the shores of the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean. And then if we go eastwards from Israel, we will find the countries of Jordan and Syria. And then after that, we will have nowadays Iraq. And only after Iraq, we will get to Iran. So like you said, it's a really big distance. But I think, the hate and the hate of the Iranian regime is not based on kilometers or miles. It is based on a very radical ideology that wishes to exterminate the Jews and the Jewish state, and chooses to do so also by, like I said before, by planting these terror organizations closer to the Israeli border that can attack Israel. But in the end, the end game, like the Iranian regime planned, would have always been the Iranian regime themselves attacking and annihilating Israel.
So can you explain a little bit about this hate? We see wars where countries like to enlarge in their territory, or where countries are looking for minerals and things they need. But here Iran doesn't need anything from Israel, it seems, and still they invest money in buying weapons, supplying weapons to others to attack Israel. So where is this hate coming from? What's the basis for this hate?
Well, it's a very good question. I think it's also a very deep question. I'll try to explain it as clear as possible. So, first of all, the Iranian regime is Islamic. And of course, also within the Islam, you have different sorts of Islam, different streams, but the Iranian regime is Shiite Islamic, and the Shiites are known in general to be, and really in general, more radical and more aggressive than Sunnites, which is the other large group of Muslims within the Islam. So within the ideology of not only Shiism, but also Sunnism, actually both, there is a great hatred towards the Jews. And the hatred towards the Jews actually goes back to the time of their prophet, Muhammad, when, according to Islam, Prophet Muhammad received the Quran through the angel Gabriel and went to convert the people in nowadays Saudi Arabia, in that area. But there were also Jewish tribes living there. And the Jewish tribes refused to convert to the Islam that their Prophet Muhammad was bringing, and chose to fight the Prophet Muhammad. Now, the Prophet Muhammad, in the eyes of Muslims, is the perfect Muslim. So whatever the Prophet Muhammad did should also be done by Muslims nowadays. And I'm speaking really in general terms, of course, but this really goes for the Iranian regime. And the Prophet Muhammad slaughtered the Jews because they refused to convert to Islam. So this is one element of why that hate is so deep. The other element why the hate is so deep is the Quran is interpreted, received as the final perfect piece of the monotheistic religions. So we started with Judaism with one God, Christianity, and then later came the Islam. So in the eyes of the Muslims, the Quran, their holy book, is the final piece, the closure in a line of monotheistic Abrahamic religions. But then we saw that the God of Israel, who has always been alive, started to fulfill the prophecies that were spoken about in the Bible. For instance, bringing the Jewish people back out of the diaspora after almost 2,000 years to the promised land of Israel. So the fact that the God of Israel is still alive and fulfills his promises, and that we see the prophecies actually being fulfilled in our days, completely contradicts the fact that the Quran is the final perfect piece of the monotheistic religions and that everyone should become Muslim. So this shakes the foundation of Islam, and combined with the enmity and the fighting against their prophet Muhammad, that created like a sort of cocktail in which Jew hatred is very, very common, and especially within the Shiite ideology of the Iranian regime. It's something that is very deep and part of everyday business.
Now we have a strange phenomenon. We see demonstrations in the world in several places where Iranians who have fled Iran are demonstrating even with Israeli flags. So what you just explained about the hate is the hate of a regime. What about the people of Iran? I think there are 90 million people living in Iran. We had demonstrations in Iran, and the regime killed its own citizens. Yeah. Any idea how much the support for the regime is? How much percentage of the population are supporting the regime?
Well, that, the exact percentage, it's hard to say, but we do know that it is a minority within Iran itself. The big issue, of course, is that this minority has all the weapons, all the money, and all the power within the institutions, but also outside of the institutions, amongst common conservative Shiite population in Iran. So this is a big problem, but we see that, like you said before, the Iranians that are not living in Iran are mostly Iranians that had to flee. Right. When the Ayatollahs came into power in 1979, these people had to flee because they were regarded as enemies, because they were either secular or Kurdish or one of many other minorities in Iran. So they fled, and they've been longing to return to their country, to their families. They've been longing to see their country free. And Israel and the United States are the only two countries that are strong enough to do it, because the opposition within Iran and also outside of Iran don't have any weapons, they don't have a lot of money, so they cannot do it themselves. So that's why we see a lot of Israeli, a lot of American flags with these people, because these people really see the Israelis and the Americans as the people that are coming to freedom. And that's we actually see an ancient bond between peoples, because it was the Persian Emperor Cyrus who allowed Jews, when he defeated the Babylons, I think in English, for the Jews to return to Jerusalem to rebuild their temple. So 2,500 years ago, it was the Persians who freed the Jews, and now a lot of Iranians say now the Jews are coming to free us, and it's a very, of course, also very emotional thing.
So, if you look to the conflict now and we see the attacks, what is the military goal? What does the U.S. and Israel hope to achieve?
Yeah, well, you have a couple of different goals. The first goal is to make sure that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, about which we can talk a bit more, but it's the private, let's say the private army of the Ayatollah of the country, that they will have zero military capacities to first suppress their own people, and second, to commit terror attacks and to train terrorist organizations outside of the country. So that's number one goal. The second goal is, of course, to make sure that the Iranian regime never obtains the capabilities to produce a nuclear weapon, which can be used against Israel, against the United States. So those are the two main military goals. But of course, the third goal is to create the circumstances in which the Iranian people can really rise up united to overthrow the regime. The Israelis and the Americans, they know that you cannot bomb a country into freedom.
Right.
This mistake was earlier made by the United States in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and it didn't work. So the Israelis and the Americans know this, but what you can do is create the circumstances, weaken the regime to its core, shake it to its core, through which the Iranian people can then take over. So these are the three big goals of this military operation.
So that's explains also why they are taking out the leaders of the regime.
Exactly.
Yeah. You talked about Lebanon. You talked about proxies. The Ring of Fire. Now, Iran is not neighboring Israel. Lebanon is, and all of a sudden, Lebanon is involved in this war. Can you explain what's happening? Why Israel is attacking Lebanon at this moment?
Yeah. So, like I said before, in 1979, when the Islamic Revolution actually succeeded and finished and the Ayatollahs took over, they pledged, like I said, to create a ring of fire around Israel. And what does this mean? This means that because of the fact that Iran is on, a 2,000 kilometer distance, they needed organizations closer to Israel or even within Israel to be able to weaken Israel, to harm Israel, after which they could give the final strike. This has been the strategy of the Iranian regime for decades. So what did they do? In Lebanon, you have a terrorist organization, a Shiite organization, which is also therefore ideologically very closely aligned to the Iranian regime. Mm-hmm. It's called Hezbollah. And Hezbollah has been active in several wars against Israel. In 2006, they started a war against Israel, but also after the 7th of October attacks by Hamas, they joined the fight by shooting rockets at Israel. Right. So what we saw actually after 1 or 2 days of attacks of Israel and the United States on Iranian soil, Hezbollah decided to join the fight and to support their ally, the Iranian regime, by firing rockets at Israel. And Israel responded in a very, very strong way by, again, taking out the leadership of Hezbollah. And Israel will make sure that Hezbollah has no future at all, because the mere existence of such a radical organization at your border threatens the safety of all your civilians. And the Israeli army is there to safeguard the people of Israel, whether they be Jewish, Muslim, Christian. That's the task of the army, and they are going to fulfill it. I'm sure of that.
If you look to the Ring of Fire, what you have been talking about, so you said Hamas, Hezbollah. Are there any others in this Ring of Fire we can expect to join this war against Israel, against the US?
Well, Hamas, of course, Hamas and Hezbollah are the two most known terror organizations that are part of this Ring of Fire. You also have the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They might join, we don't know for now. Of course, the power of Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip is decimated, is not strong anymore because of the war that has already been ongoing in the Gaza Strip. But Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad also have a presence in Judea and Samaria in many cities. So this is also why the Israeli army called up many reservists to make sure that the threat coming from those organizations can be dealt with. But it is still a possibility that they would attack. And then you have the Houthis, a terror organization in Yemen, which again, it's like 1,600 kilometers from Israel. It's located on the Arab Peninsula next to Saudi Arabia. They could also fire ballistic missiles because they received those missiles from the Iranian regime. Until now, they haven't done so, but they could start firing. But then they will, of course, provoke a response from Israel, which they already received in the past, and that response will be very hard.
And the Houthis are also Shiite?
Yes, the Houthis are Shiite, Hezbollah is Shiite, Palestinian Islamic Jihad is Shiite.
Okay.
Hamas is an exception.
Okay.
Hamas is a Sunnite organization. Normally, there is a lot of hatred between Shiites and Sunnites, or Sunnis, how you say it in Arabic or in Hebrew. There is a lot of hatred because of the disagreement about who should succeed the Prophet Muhammad after his death. But I'll leave that for, on the side for now, that conflict. But they hate each other a lot, and they fought many bloody battles, and they still nowadays kill each other. But apparently it seems that their hatred against Israel and the Jews supersedes their own religious conflicts and their differences. Yeah. And so the Iranian regime also started to fund Hamas.
Now, if we read the news, we see that Iran is attacking American bases in Bahrain, Qatar, Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. Those Gulf states do not seem to be involved or are getting involved. What is your view on those Gulf states? What's happening, for instance, with Qatar?
Yeah, there are some very interesting developments here. First of all, the Iranian regime started shooting missiles towards these countries, mainly focused on American military bases that are present in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Oman, in the United Arab Emirates. But they've also been attacking civilian infrastructure. Yeah. We saw, for instance, in Dubai, the Burj Khalifa, the highest tower in the world, was also attacked by an Iranian drone. So we basically see that the Iranian regime wants to drag the whole region into a war. And this, most of the time, this is the behavior of somebody that has run out of most of its options to defend itself and wants to create as much chaos as it can. Now, the Gulf states, like you said before, Saudi Arabia and all the countries we mentioned before, are Sunnites. So they have a very old hatred, antagony towards the Shiite regime in Tehran. So they are enemies already.
Right.
And now the Iranian regime started to attack them. Now, these Gulf states are all allies of the United States. Some of them are also allies of Israel. The United Arab Emirates, who joined the Abraham Accords in 2015, the great accords by President Trump that created normalization between Israel and many Arab states.
Right.
So what we actually see now is that the Iranian regime had the goal to drag the whole region into chaos, but it looks like the result of their steps is actually going to be that the Arab states and Israel are getting closer towards each other. But there is one very weird exception, and that is Qatar. Qatar has, since the establishment of Hamas in 1987, has been the main funder of the terror organization.
Right.
Millions and millions and millions of dollars went to the organization. And Qatar, therefore, is also, of course, an enemy of Israel. This is publicly known. Both countries also state this. But because the Iranian regime attacked Qatar, and Qatar is an ally of the United States, we actually see now, and this is one of the messages that I got last night, that the Qataris are now joining the United States and Israel, not only with defensive measures, but also attacking measures, wow. which is really strange if you regard the fact, what I just said, that Qatar has been funding Hamas, which has been dedicated to the destruction of Israel since its establishment in 1987. So, you know, it's kind of realpolitik, how you call it. The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Right.
And we shouldn't, of course, underestimate the intentions of the Qataris. They are not friends of Israel. They are still no friends of Israel. But we see that now the situation has led to even the Qataris and the Israelis sort of cooperating against the Iranian regime.
Forces. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really a big exception, and I think it shows that the Iranian regime made a grave mistake.
Yeah. One final question, Raouf. You talked about the Abraham Accords and a miracle that Arab states were seeking peace with Israel, making peace with Israel, economic cooperation, science cooperation. And I had the idea the Abrahamic Accord they were not dead, but they were not so lively. Now we see a renewal of those accords and strengthening with a common enemy of Iran.
Yeah.
So what is your view? Will Saudi Arabia step into the Abraham Accords?
Well, of course, it's always hard to predict, but one of the reasons that we know already for sure, one of the reasons that Hamas carried out those brutal attacks on October 7, 2023, was the fact that the Saudis were actually very close to joining the Abraham Accords. And Hamas wanted to prevent that, and they succeeded. At least they postponed their participation. Yeah. And if the Saudi Arabia would join the Abraham Accords, this would be a monumental step. Also because of the fact that the holiest places in Islam are in Saudi Arabia, Mecca and Medina. So if this country, which is often called the keeper of the Islam, will join normalization with Israel, this would shake the Arab and the Islamic world. Yeah. Now, in fact, you're right when you say that the Abraham Accords have been shaky, have been tense at times in the past 2 years because of the war in Gaza. But what we actually see now is that this actually brings them closer together, and the hostile way in which the Iranian regime is actually attacking everybody actually brings them closer together, and this could result in eventually Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, and that would be a great miracle, and that would really we already see God's work before our eyes coming true, and all that is happening. But if the Saudis would join the Abraham Accords, that would be monumental, and that could really create such a different dynamic in the Middle East, a dynamic of peace, quiet, stability, especially when the Iranian regime is gone.
Now, I know that you can't look into the future, but we're all thinking, when will this war stop? How many days, how many weeks? Do you have any indication where you say, well, what you've heard and read, how long the war will prolong?
Well, I think we have to think in terms of weeks or months rather than days. Every war is very unpredictable, so you never know beforehand which other steps the Iranian regime is going to take, which will provoke a further escalation by Israel, by the United States and their Arab allies. But for now, also President Trump said, and also high officials of Israel said, that the war would probably prolong until after Pesach, Passover, which is due to take place at the end of March, beginning of April. Yeah. So we will be in a war for sure for another month. At least that's what I expect. But all will also depend on the moment in which the Iranian people will rise up united against the regime. That will be the decisive moment for how long this war will take, when they will take over from the Israelis and the Americans. It's hard to predict, but I think for the coming month, we're still going to be in a situation of war.
Raouf, thank you very much for your explanation. And we were talking about things we see happening in the Middle East. We read in the paper, we see on TV, but there was you mentioned that it started with jealousy, or that the God of Israel is still alive and bringing his people back. So the core of the conflict is a spiritual conflict. And I think as Christians, we can pray into spiritual conflicts. We have been equipped for that, and we can pray, like the Bible tells us, to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But let us also pray for the people of Iran, that this evil regime will fall and disappear, and the people in Iran can live in freedom, democracy, and choose their own lives with peace with Israel. Raouf, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Emisiunea Ziua se apropie, se încheie aici. Vă mulțumim pentru atenție și vă dăm o nouă întâlnire săptămâna viitoare la aceeași oră. Sunt Codruța Burghelea, vă spun la revedere și Dumnezeu să vă binecuvânteze!